Hello and welcome to another episode of Game Design Notes. I've got about a half an hour drive ahead of me, so we will jump right into things. Don't forget you can check out our content over at www.gamedesignnotes.com. And if you enjoy these videos, please like, subscribe, and share them so we can grow the channel. And with that being said, let's jump right into this. So this episode is going to be about tips for becoming a game designer, or becoming a better game designer, kind of if you're just starting out. So this is tips that I've kind of learned, excuse me, over the past, I don't know, year or so. I've always been super interested in games, and I develop software for a living, so I've always kind of gravitated towards video games. And what I found is that's kind of difficult to do. So my first tip is start with board games or tabletop games, something that's physical. And the reason why is video games are great. Don't get me wrong, and I've developed some, and it's a really interesting thing to do, and it's there's a lot of game design to be learned from that. If you're just getting started, if you start out with physical games, it's a lot easier. And the big reason for that is you can prototype for tabletop games so easily. You write stuff on paper, you cut it out, you can make little fake decks of cards pretty easily. There's a whole lot you can do, and you can write all of these rule systems and really get that feel for, okay, how does interactions work, in this game. And a lot of, unless you can't really do like a first-person shooter at a tabletop game, but there's a lot of other games, that are video games that could be done in a physical format. And so that's kind of my first tip is, just because of ease of use, go with physical games. You can prototype much faster. You don't have to learn any programming languages or anything. You can just hop in, start making games, and you can test it pretty quickly with your friends. You can sit and say, hey, tonight, instead of playing our regular game or for the first half hour, let's take a look at this little game that I've been putting together, and we'll just see how it goes. And you can learn what pieces are hard for them to understand, for example, or they maybe didn't explain well enough. And so yeah, that is my first tip, is to make physical games when you're first starting out. And holy cow, is it windy today. Alright, and my next tip is work on content for another game. And I guess what I mean by that is create your own content for another game. And this really ties back to that first point of make physical games, because you say there's a game that comes out that you really like, let's say it's an RTS game, real-time strategy, the overhead view, you're controlling an army. I used to play a lot of those when I was younger, and I always had all these ideas. What if we had a unit that did this? Or we had an ability that did this, or a faction that was based on this idea. I had all these ideas, but there's no way for me to, test those ideas out. At least most games, they don't give you any kind of editor or anything, so there's no way to try your ideas out. Whereas in a board game, you guys are running the game. You guys are the processor, whoever you're playing with. So you guys can decide at the beginning of the game, hey, let's try it with this new card or this new item or this new rule. We'll replace this other rule with a new rule. This is called, house ruling things. And then you can play it. You can test that out. You can add stuff to the game and test it and see how it fits alongside the rest of the game. Now, the benefit of starting here and starting with somebody else's game is that creating an entire game from scratch is difficult. There's a lot of things that, if you go through the process of trying to create a whole game, there's just a lot of stuff that you wouldn't realize goes into it, or you need a lot of you really got to get that core foundation built before you can really start doing meaningful testing. And being able to just tack on a little idea onto an existing game can be really beneficial, because you can learn a lot just from designing that one little item, or that one little card. For example, there's a Star Wars board game called Imperial Assault. It's basically Descent Star Wars version. So you have units, and they have different attributes and stuff, and they have different attack dice, and you move around the board and attack your enemies. One of my players and I have been working on coming up with custom cards for the different factions, and kind of talking about them amongst ourselves. Would this be good? Is this way too overpowered? How would it work in the game? And then we can sit down and we can say, okay, for this match, we're going to include this unit and this unit, and we'll just see how it plays out. See if it's just ridiculously strong or not. And you can learn a lot from doing that. There's just a lot of just that iteration of going through and actually creating something, and then being able to integrate it and to test it, and make your changes. So that's kind of my second point. Now, there are a lot of communities based around designing content like this, and especially in the role-playing game area, or the niche, I guess. There's a lot of role-playing communities for homebrew content. So D&D has, I know at least 2. They've got the subreddits. They've got Unearthed Arcana, which is kind of your more polished work, and then they have, I can't think of the other one off the top of my head. They have some good Reddit communities, and I'm sure there are other places out there besides Reddit that have communities specifically for creating content and critiquing content of other users. And that can be a great way, again, if you're just learning game design, just want to get into it, you just want to do something, you can go out and you can make, say a D&D item or a spell or a race or whatever, and you can create all this content, you can put it out on the Reddit, and you can just let them beat it up, which is great. I mean, you might have some people that are mean and aren't nice about their critique, but I think for the most part, all feedback is good feedback, and you'll find that there are a lot of good people out there that give you meaningful insight as to what your idea is, and maybe how it should be formatted, so that it makes sense within the terms of the game. And so this is something that I've done. I've created a D&D spell that I put out there, put it out on Reddit, went over fairly well, and I got some good critique. I can post the links to those, one to the spell description, and then others to the couple Reddit posts that I did about it. So that is in a nutshell my 2 biggest points for beginning game designers: is focus on stuff that's easy for you to do. So physical board games are much easier to start out with than video games, and then create content for existing games, so you don't have to build a whole engine, whole rules engine to run the game. You can make a couple little things, you can get in there, you can test it, you can see how it does. You learn a lot from just that little bit of design and iterating through that process. And I would argue that making a bunch of content that's more of an add-on to a game is going to give you is going to be an easier way to learn different ideas in game design, and different mechanics based on the game that you're building it for, than trying to just build something from scratch. Because when you base it off of something that exists, you just have a lot to work with, and there are people that are smarter than you that have done this before, and you want to learn from the people who are smarter than you. That's the best place to be. You should never be the smartest person in a room. because otherwise you can't really learn a whole lot. So anyways, this has been a very short little video, but if there are topics in game design if you guys would like me to talk about, please leave them in the comments below, and we will get those videos produced. This will be linked on the website. Again, that's www.gamedesignnotes.com. I really appreciate you stopping by and listening. And remember to like, subscribe, and share so we can grow this channel. Thanks for watching.